The air was sharp with pine and smoke when I reached the edge of the property. For a long moment I stood still, not believing what I saw. The cabin, my cabin, was gone. All that remained was a heap of crushed lumber and roofing tin, scattered like bones across the slope. The morning sun glinted off a nail half, buried in the dirt, and the faint smell of charred wood drifted toward the lake. The wind off Clearwater Lake used to whistle through the eaves, humming against the tin roof I'd hammered in place with my father's old mallet. I could still picture the porch swing he built, where I used to sit at dusk and watch the fish rise for insects. Now, that swing lay splintered in half under a broken joist, one chain still hanging from what was left of the porch beam. I crouched down and ran a hand over the dirt where the front steps had been. The ground was warm, like the demolition crew had left only hours before. In a way, I guess they had. Behind me, the crunch of boots on gravel. A man's voice called out, casual and rehearsed. "Morning, you can't be standing that close to the debris, sir. It's not safe." I straightened slowly. The man wore an orange vest with Lakeshore Property Association stamped in black letters. He had a clipboard tucked under one arm, a radio on his belt, and the smug, bureaucratic ease of someone who'd done this too many times without consequence. "I'm the owner," I said. He looked me over, puzzled. Owner of what? I stared at him. Of what used to be standing right there. The man's expression flickered between confusion and defensiveness. "Oh, you must be Mr. Grant. We had your name on the list, thought you'd been notified." Notified. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "Of what, exactly?" He shuffled a few papers on his clipboard. "Non-compliant structure, built within 50 feet of the natural waterline. No record of county permitting or shoreline variance. The board approved removal last week. We're just enforcing code." I walked past him, stepping carefully over the rubble. Every board I saw had a memory attached, the hand. Plain cedar panels, the wood. Burning stove I'd salvaged from a farmhouse. Even the tiny window boxes where I'd planted wild mint each spring. Gone, all of it. "Who gave you demolition authorization?" I asked. He looked back down at his papers. "The HOA Compliance Committee, standard process. Standard process doesn't include destruction of private property without county review," I said. "Sir," he replied, and his tone changed that careful, patronizing calm people use when they think they're the ones in charge. "We followed our bylaws. If you have concerns, you can take it up at the next board meeting." I turned and looked directly at him. "You're certain you followed every step, every required notice, signature, and verification?" "Absolutely," he said, but there was a tremor in his voice. "We don't take action unless everything's in order." "Good," I said, reaching into my jacket. "Then you won't mind if I verify that myself." The wallet flipped open in my hand with a small, satisfying snap. His eyes went first to the photo ID, then to the gold, embossed seal above it. "County Building Inspection Division Inspector L.I. Grant." The clipboard slipped an inch in his grip. You're that Grant, the same," I said evenly, "which means you just demolished a legally inspected and certified dwelling without so much as a call to my office?" He blinked, his mouth opening and closing. We had documentation. I swear, the board told us, show me." He fumbled through his papers until he found a stapled packet. I took it, flipping through quickly. The forms were laughable, half-filled checkboxes, unsigned approval fields, and a permit number that didn't even exist in the county system. My chest tightened with a mix of anger and disbelief. "This isn't authorization," I said. "This is a template. You didn't even bother to verify the parcel records." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I just follow orders, sir. The board president said it was final." I crouched again, running a hand through the rubble until I found a chunk of my front door, pine, with a knot right where my initials used to be carved. My father's knife had cut those letters when I was 17. I brushed off the ash and straightened up slowly. When you tear down someone's home, I said, you don't get to hide behind clipboards and vests. He took a nervous step back. Sir, please, if you're going to file a complaint. Oh, I'll do more than file a complaint. I took my phone out and started taking pictures of the wreckage, the remains of the foundation, the lake view, even the heavy equipment tire tracks still imprinted in the mud. Each photo would go into my report. Each one would tell a story the HOA wouldn't want on record. The man tried to speak again, but his voice caught halfway. Look, we thought it was abandoned. No power, no mail delivery, no one had seen anyone here in months. I was renovating, I said flatly. And you'd have known that if you'd checked the work notices filed in June. He blinked. The what? The notices I personally approved under the county's renovation code. I turned my phone toward him, showing a photo of the official permit, my own signature at the bottom. This cabin was up to code. You destroyed it without due process. He ran a hand over his mouth. This is bad, he murmured. I let out a low breath, steadying myself. The anger was there, burning under my ribs, but it wasn't the shouting kind. It was quiet, measured, the kind that makes people in power nervous. You'll tell your board. I said finally that they've overstepped jurisdiction. They've violated county property law and executed demolition without administrative oversight. You'll also tell them I'll be in touch. Officially, he nodded rapidly, the color draining from his face. I took a few final photos, then turned toward the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the gray sky like a mirror. It had seen it all, the building, the years of solitude, and now the wreckage. As I walked back toward my truck, I heard the man's radio crackle behind me. He answered in a trembling voice, his words carried faintly on the wind. Yeah, it's done. No, we've got a problem. Big one. I paused at the edge of the gravel road and looked back one last time. The orange vest was still there, standing amid the ruins, looking suddenly very small. I took another deep breath of the smoky air, then said quietly to myself, you had no idea who you were dealing with. The engine of my truck rumbled to life. As I pulled away, the reflection of the demolished cabin faded from my rearview mirror, replaced by a clear image of what came next: reports, hearings, and consequences. They'd wanted to play by their own rules. Now they were about to meet mine. ChatGPT said. The boardroom smelled faintly of lemon polish and old carpet, the kind of sterile, over-controlled air that tried too hard to smell professional. A long mahogany table stretched the length of the room, flanked by 12 chairs on either side. Most were filled. The HOA board sat across from me, dressed in their weekday armor. Crisp suits, polite smiles, and just enough condescension to hide the fear I could already sense beneath the surface. The president, Marian Langford, was at the head of the table. She was the kind of woman who spoke in measured syllables, always thinking 3 steps ahead of everyone else, or at least believing she did. Her pearl necklace glinted under the fluorescent light as she shuffled a stack of papers. Mr. Grant, she began, her tone carefully neutral, we appreciate you meeting with us to clear up this misunderstanding. I said nothing, just watched her. I could tell the word misunderstanding had been chosen by committee. Soft, harmless, a word that meant we did something unforgivable, but please don't destroy us for it. She went on, as you know, the association acted in accordance with Section 14 of the Lakeshore Covenant, which grants authority to. I opened my briefcase and dropped a thick folder onto the table. It landed with a weighty thud that made the nearest board member flinch. Section 14. I said, pertains to temporary unpermitted structures that pose immediate environmental or safety hazards. My cabin was neither. It was built under county supervision, inspected annually, and listed on your own property register. I flipped open the folder and slid a document toward her. That's the inspection certificate, the same one filed with the assessor's office 12 years ago, signed by the county inspector. Langford adjusted her glasses. Her voice wavered just slightly. Well, I see that here, yes, but the compliance committee determined. I am the compliance committee. I interrupted, keeping my tone level but sharp enough to cut through her rehearsed phrasing. At least the only one that has legal jurisdiction in this county. The room fell quiet. Someone cleared their throat near the far end of the table. A younger man with a nervous habit of tapping his pen. "Mr. Grant," he started, "we understand your frustration, but surely you can appreciate the position we were in. We received multiple complaints from residents about the structure's proximity to the waterline. Our bylaws require—" "Your bylaws?" I said, "end at the property line. Anything beyond that requires county authorization. You acted outside your authority without verification and demolished private property based on hearsay and incomplete records." A few murmurs rippled around the room. The lawyer, seated beside Langford, an older man with thinning hair and the expression of someone who had not slept properly in days, leaned forward. "Inspector Grant," he said slowly, "what exactly are you seeking here? Surely we can find a resolution that satisfies everyone." "Resolution?" I echoed, tilting my head. "My home was destroyed. Everything I built with my own hands gone. There's no resolution that undoes that, but there will be accountability." Langford tried to regain her composure. "Of course," she said, her voice honeyed but brittle. "We're deeply sorry for the error, but mistakes happen. If you'll allow us some time to—" "An error," I repeated. I let the word sit there, heavy and echoing. An error is a wrong address on a letter. This was a calculated decision, executed without permits, oversight, or verification. You hired a demolition crew and gave them permission to destroy a certified dwelling. That's not a mistake. That's negligence. The lawyer shifted in his seat. "Legally speaking, Mr. Grant, the association may not have been fully informed." I cut him off by pulling another document from the folder. "These are your meeting minutes from the vote authorizing the demolition. Notice something missing. The motion lacks a recorded verification of property status. That means the board voted blind. And under county ordinance, that's grounds for revocation of your charter." That got their attention. Chairs creaked. Someone muttered, "Revocation," under their breath. I leaned forward slightly. "You see, I don't just inspect buildings. I oversee compliance with state property law, which means I'm the one who signs off on your operating license each renewal cycle. You've been running this association under the assumption that you answer to yourselves. You don't." Langford's hand trembled slightly as she set down her pen. "You're threatening us," she said quietly. "No," I said, sitting back in my chair, "I'm stating the facts." For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling lights. Outside, a wind had picked up, rustling the flag by the entrance. Finally, the lawyer cleared his throat again. "Mr. Grant, Illy, what would it take to make this right?" I met his gaze. "Full restoration of the cabin at the HOA expense. Compensation for lost value, materials, and labor. A public acknowledgement of fault, signed by every board member, distributed to all residents, and finally a complete review of your internal authorization procedures conducted under county supervision." Langford bristled. "That's absurd. You're asking us to—" "I'm asking you to obey the law," I said, cutting through her protest. "You've been playing at authority without understanding it. Now you'll learn what accountability looks like." One of the younger board members, a man with a receding hairline and a nervous laugh, piped up. "You can't possibly expect us to rebuild it ourselves. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars." "Then you shouldn't have torn it down," I said simply. The lawyer leaned toward Langford, whispering something I couldn't hear. Her expression hardened, then softened again as she forced a smile. "We'll need time to discuss this with our insurer," she said. "If you'll allow us, I've already notified the county attorney's office," I said. "They'll be reviewing your actions for potential property rights violations. Consider this meeting a courtesy, not a negotiation." The air grew heavier. You could feel the balance of power shift, the slow, sinking realization settling in around the table. Langford's fingers toyed with her pearl necklace. "You'll destroy us," she said, the veneer finally cracking. I met her eyes. "No," I said. "You destroyed yourselves when you thought rules didn't apply to you." I stood, gathered my papers, and slid them back into my briefcase. The sound of the latch clicking shut echoed in the stillness. "You'll receive the county's formal directive within the week. I suggest you start looking at contractors and lawyers." As I turned to leave, no one stopped me. No one said another word. Outside, the sunlight had shifted low over the lake, throwing long shadows across the parking lot. The wind carried the smell of pine and water, cleaner here, away from the polished air of the boardroom. I paused beside my truck, taking one last look at the HOA building behind me. By spring, my cabin stood again, rebuilt on the same foundation, stronger and straighter than before. The county sent a new compliance officer to oversee the process, at my request, though I hardly needed the help. The HOA paid every cent. Sometimes, when I sat on the new porch swing, watching the sunset shimmer on the lake, I'd see a flash of orange at the far shore, some new recruit checking permits or measuring shoreline setbacks. They never came near my property, not anymore. Justice, like craftsmanship, takes time, but when it's done right, it lasts.